Okay, so I'm assuming everyone can hear me okay? Okay. All right. If there's any problems, just put something in the chat. That'd be great. Okay, so welcome. Thank you very much for coming today. This webinar will be recorded. There should be live captions, so you should be able to follow if you wish to. If you go into more, you can select live captions so that you can follow as I'm speaking. Just to introduce myself, my name is Nina Parson. I'm a chartered occupational psychologist leading and developing the neurodiversity support services here at Insight. And throughout my career, the primary focus of my work has been assessing, developing and supporting performance at work at an individual level, team, and also at an organizational level. I've been working in the field of neurodiversity for approximately 16 years. And but although saying that, I've actually conducted my first work adjustments assessment all the way back 30 years ago when I worked for the DWP. And outside of my day-to-day role, I sit on a number of committees supporting well-being, health and neurodiversity in the workplace. That includes the Royal Society of Medicine and the Society of Occupational Medicine. I've also given insights as a practitioner into the Dyslexia Screening Bill, the Autism Act, and most recently last week to the Employment Relations Bill, which is looking to strengthen the Flexible Working Act going forward. So that's currently in consultation. So I'm quite busy outside of my day job as well. There will be an opportunity to ask questions at the end, and this gives you an idea of what we're going to be covering today. We have approximately 45 minutes, so I'm looking forward to answering any questions at the end. If you want to pop anything in the chat, please feel free to do so in terms of questions, and we'll try and get to those at the end as well. Okay, so before we start, I'd just be really interested to ask you some questions. So you'll need your mobile phone for this. I'm going to get you to scan a QR code. So have your mobile phones ready, please. And then using your phones, if you could just scan that QR code, you should see the question appear. And I'd really appreciate it if you could just give me your response to the following question. How confident do you feel in your knowledge and understanding of neurodiversity to effectively support a neurodivergent colleague at work? So we've got 5 options there. Not confident at all, but not very confident, somewhat confident, confident and very confident. So it'd be really great to understand how you kind of gauge yourself at the moment in terms of being able to support a colleague who's neurodiverse. It's totally anonymous. We can't trace these answers back to anybody, so it'd be just really helpful to kind of get a gauge of where you currently are at the moment. So okay, we can start seeing if some responses are coming in. Okay, great. So we've got some interesting respondents here. We've got somewhat confident is leading, not very confident is second, some are very confident, which is great to see. So a real mix, really. And I think that really kind of resonates with me in terms of how the conversations that I often have with employers as well. There's some understanding, some level of knowledge, but it can vary, not just in terms of organization, but of course, individuals themselves. So no, thank you very much. That's really, really helpful. So just want to go on to now ask you, what is neurodiversity? We hear that word quite a lot, and it really is describing the natural variations in human brain functioning. And it's really shifted in the last 30 years from a medical model, which was very much based on curing, to a biopsychosocial model, which sees it now as part of natural diversity within humans. Initially, the term neurodiversity was associated with autism back in the 1990s when it was first coined, but now it tends to relate to other neurodevelopmental conditions, and this is in particular is ADHD, dyslexia, DCD, dyspraxia, dyscalculia, as well as autism. And some people include other conditions. So again, it how it's used has changed as well over time, and it can include things like Tourette's and broader brain differences such as mental health. But for the purpose of the work that we do, primarily when we're talking about neurodiversity and when you see it written in research papers, they tend to be focusing on these neurodevelopmental conditions. And these conditions, they're present from early life. And with more awareness, the challenges are being picked up sooner in early childhood now than ever before. And we're recognizing if children aren't meeting developmental milestones or they're having challenges in their education, we're now in a place where this is all being picked up sooner. So, for example, some child may be slower to progress in learning to read. They may be very academically advanced compared to their peers. They may have challenges with emotional regulation and difficulties forming friendship groups, but they might be amazing at creative subjects. So there's these are all kind of being picked up already and starting to be picked up more and more. So how neurodiversity manifests in people is completely different. I'm sorry, I think if someone wouldn't mind turning off their microphone, that'd be super. Thank you. But I think one of the key things to take away from today is that how a neurodiverse condition manifests is completely different in each individual, even if you've been given the same diagnosis. But if you think about those early experiences and the level of support available to someone from childhood through education and into the workplace has a huge influence on life choices, the career paths they make, or or the job roles that they take. So it's really important to remember that those experiences are going to be very different, particularly when you start also looking at intersectionality of gender, race, class, religion. They all play a part in not only self-perception and identity, but how other people might perceive them as well. So obviously that can differ between individuals hugely, and that therefore their experiences in the workplace, although two people might have autism, it could look very different. So just to give you some idea of the numbers of people that we're talking about in the UK, in terms of dyslexia, we think approximately 10% of the population have dyslexia, and that impacts literacy skills, reading, spelling, understanding how letters and sounds make words, and it also can impact working memory and processing speed. And I'll talk a little bit more about those later. And then in terms of ADHD, in the adult population, we think there's about 3 to 4% who have ADHD in the UK, but there's actually a difference between male and females. Males are 3 times more likely to be diagnosed with ADHD than females. And then in terms of autism, well, we think now, latest figures suggest there's a 1.32% of people in the UK have autism, and that's increased, and that's based on NHS England data from 2024. The figure that's often bandied about is that it's 1% or 1 in 100 people, but that figure has increased in the last couple of years. And we know that someone who has autism is likely to have challenges with social cues, communication challenges in some instances. They may exhibit repetitive behaviors or sensitivity, particularly sensory sensitivities to sound, smells, touch, light, etc. These can all impact someone who's got autism, as well as other neurodiverse conditions. And in terms of dyscalculia, one that we don't hear a lot about, but this is to do with the challenges around numbers and understanding mathematical concepts. We think around 6% of the population have dyscalculia. And for DCD, dyspraxia, which impacts gross and fine motor coordination, so that could be handwriting. They can struggle with poor spatial awareness, processing information, planning, learning new tasks such as operating machinery can all be a challenge. It doesn't mean that they can't, it just means that often it takes them longer to learn those skills and processes, and it just means that often they need extra time to practice. So that just gives you a sort of a picture of where we are in terms of the population. And obviously, having a diagnosis of one of these conditions is great in some respects because it really empowers that person to have a language and a vocabulary to self-advocate. So they can come to their HR department and say, look, I've got a diagnosis of autism, I've got a diagnosis of dyslexia. And it's a good framework to help people to explain what's going on for them. We know that approximately all in total together, there's approximately 15 to 20% of the population in the UK have a neurodevelopmental condition, and that actually equates to 10.5 to 14 million people. That's twice the size of London in terms of the population. And we also know that there's often co-occurrence with the estimates that 42% of people with dyslexia may also have ADHD, and 30% of people who are autistic also have ADHD. So the chances are that you are probably going to know someone or be working with someone who is neurodivergent, whether you know it or not. It could be a relative, a friend, a colleague, a customer, or a client. But the high chances are that you, in your working life, will come across neurodiverse individuals. And as I mentioned before, we know that there's often a co-occurrence, and this also goes for other conditions such as mental health. And we've often seen cases where people are referred for or treated for a mental health condition, but actually there's an underlying undiagnosed neurodevelopmental condition. And it's quite possible for a person, they might have received a diagnosis of, say, autism, but not received a diagnosis for ADHD. And the two could be combined together and causing additional challenges in the workplace. And we know that these are some of the conditions that can also co-occur with individuals who have neurodevelopmental conditions. But of course, not everyone's going to be able to get a diagnosis. And even if they have had one diagnosis, they may also not have had a formal diagnosis of other conditions. And if you think about it, at the moment, there are some very long waiting lists in the UK, particularly for ADHD and autism on the NHS. So I think one of the key things to take away from today is that, really at the end of the day, you want to be looking to support the challenges, irrespective of whether they've had a formal diagnosis or not. And that's just something that I think is really important to take away from today, because not everyone's going to be able to be in that position to have had a formal diagnosis. And also under the Equality Act, they don't need a formal diagnosis. And I'll come and talk about that a bit later. So there has been a growth in neurodiversity awareness at work. We've come a long way in the last 10 years in our understanding and acceptance of neurodiversity. And people are also starting to recognize the strengths that having diverse minds can bring to the workplace. There's specialist programs that have been set up to support autistic individuals into the workplace, for example. SAP, GCHQ, Goldman Sachs, they've all put in place specialist recruitment programs or internships because they recognize that these individuals have incredible strengths that they can utilize in particular roles within their organizations, which is obviously really positive to see that change and that shift. But I'm also interested to know, have you personally seen any growth in the numbers of people in your organization disclosing they're neurodivergent? Again, it's anonymous, and please, if you could just state yes or no. If you use this QR code, I'll be really interested to see whether you've noticed an increase. Oh, wow. I assume there's some more people to add in comments there. That's really interesting. That's incredible. Wow. And people that are seeking support. So far, 93% of you that have taken part in this. Wow. And that, I think, is why you're probably all here today. So that's really interesting to hear, to see. And so another question I've got to put to you then, when did you start to see the big increases? Would you say it's been in the last year, the last 2 to 4 years, the last 5 years, maybe the last 6 to 9 years or longer? Again, be really interested to get a gauge on this. Interesting. Thank you. This is really helpful information. Yeah. So it looks like since 2020, which happens to coincide with COVID, there's been a bigger increase in the number of people coming forward as awareness has grown. And those figures that you're representing here today very much match what's out there on the internet. Here's a snapshot of a search using Google for these keywords over the last 10 years. And the increase in awareness has led to greater demand of support, not just generally, but also for employers, as you yourself are experiencing. And we know that the increase has happened for a few reasons. First, particularly around ADHD and autism, COVID was a trigger. The structure, the regularity, and all the other strategies that people had in place, their scaffold fell apart. And for the first time, people who were neurodivergent didn't have those support mechanisms in place day to day, and they struggled. And that's when we first started seeing a real increase in people coming forward. I was working through COVID, supporting individuals who were neurodivergent, and I saw a lot of increase in the number of people a big increase in the number of people coming forward. Secondly, I think the other key reason for this increase, particularly around autism and ADHD, is that it's a greater level of awareness, but also the diagnostic criteria changed for autism. And it changed from having a cutoff to a continuum. And again, more people have now been captured by that autism diagnostic label than perhaps would have been in the past. And third, I think it's about curiosity. There's a lot of talk about this area, a lot of talk around autism, a lot of talk around ADHD. You only have to look on social media to see it. And so I think a lot of it has also been an increase in terms of trying to understand more about these conditions generally. I alluded to it earlier, but we do know that there are strengths and challenges that people who are neurodiverse experience at work. And as I've mentioned before, some people can be incredibly successful in their careers who are neurodiverse, and they go on to flourish and do really well in their professions. For others, they can struggle, and often, when I've observed this, it can often be down to either the design of their workplace, the systems in place, the usability of interfaces, and the culture. And often there's a mismatch of skills and a difference in interpretation of expectations. And I've just pulled together some quotes from what some people I've heard they said to me, and maybe these resonate with you as well, and maybe you've heard people say similar things. And obviously the impact will be different depending on the job role, whether they work alone, they work as part of a team, or perhaps they're a manager. And also there is a cumulative effect. So if you have multiple challenges, co-occurring conditions, that's going to impact day to day on certain functioning and capability. And then with those other things going on, anything that happens is amplified. So it might be, you're a bit of a slow reader, but when you're feeling stressed, under pressure, you have to meet targets and you're struggling, all of that is impacting on how your brain is processing the information. And that's why often their struggles or their challenges start to come to the light because of these, and then exposing the differences which perhaps before they were able to hide, or had their compensation strategies in place to support them. But why do neurodivergent people experience these challenges? Well, one way to find this out is, as psychologists, we do like tests. We use a lot of cognitive assessment tests or other types of tests. We love a test. And what we've noticed is that if you're doing certain cognitive assessments, for someone who's neurodiverse, you see real peaks and troughs in their abilities in some cognitive tests. Whereas for a neurotypical individual, this green line, you'll often see that they have similar capabilities across different tests, whether it's verbal ability, working memory, non-verbal, or processing speed. But what we notice of neurodiverse individuals is that often they have Challenges with working memory, that's your ability to hold on to information in the short term and recall it accurately, such as following multiple instructions, memorizing and repeating a telephone number. And also, we see challenges around processing speed. So that's how quickly your brain takes in information and processes it. It could be relating to, say, scanning texts on in a document. It could be in terms of how long it takes you to learn to do something that's novel that you've not done before. So these are all aspects which can be challenging. It doesn't mean that they can't do it. It means it just takes them a little bit longer. But intellectually, we know that it's across the whole spectrum. You know, you can have incredibly capable individuals who are neurodivergent. They could be astrophysicists, they could be nuclear engineers, and be super deep subject matter experts, but it just takes them longer to do things. And sometimes in those types of roles, you need people who can do that, who can take the time to absorb information. And it doesn't mean that they're less capable, but it does highlight that in some job roles, these differences are going to lead to some challenges in what they have to do day to day in their work. And what we often see is that they have strengths in their verbal abilities, how they use language. Written skills can be really good in terms of how they're describing things. And also we find that they've also got strengths in non-verbal abilities. So that's in being able to see patterns, problem solve. It could be, for example, that they're an engineer and they see they have to assess plans or drawings and they find it easy to sort of see and translate to how that would look in the real world setting, whether it's a water pipe network, for example, or electrical wiring plans. That's where their skills, that's where their strengths can be, noted by others, this ability that they have. But as you can see, as I mentioned before, these differences can be quite marked, and the impact on that can be quite significant in certain job roles that people do. And one of the areas in the brain that we know impacts neurodivergent individuals and impacts their experiences at work is linked to the management system of the brain. And that's in this area called the frontal lobe. And that helps to control and regulate your thoughts and actions. And some of the core executive functions that this part of the brain actually does is working memory, as I mentioned before, holding on to information, being able to listen in a meeting and make notes at the same time, follow instructions, all areas which can be challenging. The ability to think flexibly, being able to adapt to changes very quickly, shifting perspectives, dealing with something unexpected that comes up at work. Again, this can be particularly challenging for some neurodivergent individuals. Self-control, emotional regulation, another part that's controlled by this area of the brain, regulating thoughts and actions, being able to manage impulse control and not having the urge to interrupt people. Again, this can be challenging for some individuals who are neurodiverse. And we use our executive functions to perform all sorts of activities that we do every day at work. And this includes planning and organizing, prioritizing, completing tasks, keeping our attention and focus, managing our time, and self-monitoring and checking that we're doing things and performing as we should be. So again, this whole area just shows you that these are things that are going on that are impacted in the brain, and that can impact therefore how things are done in the workplace and how people who are neurodiverse perform at work. It's not that they choose to be like this. It's just that these are areas that can be very challenging, and it doesn't mean it doesn't relate to every single individual. There might be some aspects that they're better at than others, but sometimes there are going to be those differences that you will be seeing, which is why they'll come to you and say, I'm really struggling to do this part of my role. This is the reason why. But we also, as I mentioned earlier, we know that they bring lots of strengths to the work. And a number of particular strengths that have been observed are long-term memory, being able to think creatively and problem solve, be very detail orientated and often subject matter experts. They can be very analytical and empathetic and also have interpersonal skills. and also be able to be flexible and multitask and resilient to different things that they're having to face. And again, not everyone fits all of these boxes, but these are some of the key areas of strength that we often see. So often something that gets asked is, are these neurodevelopmental conditions actual disabilities? Well, for a number of neurodiverse individuals, they may not even see themselves as disabled. They can function very well in their day-to-day life and in their job. Their neurodiversity doesn't impact them significantly, and they may be able to carry out their role without any need for adjustments. But we also know that some people do struggle. For example, someone who may be dyslexic and they've worked on the manufacturing shop floor assembling parts. They always had very strong visual spatial abilities. They were good at what they did, but they also had great interpersonal skills and got on well with people. They're not disabled in that context. Then they apply for a management role. They get the job, and suddenly their admin tasks are involved. They require reading. It requires looking at reports. It requires using spreadsheets, planning, organizing their team. All of a sudden, all of those things that they were not so great at start to be amplified because of the type of role that they're currently doing. And that's how we often see, we get referrals from people that maybe have changed job role, or there's been some system change at work, or different way of doing things implemented at work. And that's often where we see sometimes challenges can occur. But as I mentioned earlier, a lot of people don't get a diagnosis. Does that mean they're any less disabled? Well, is self-identification even valid? The answer to that question is yes. Under the Equality Act, disability is defined by functional impact, not diagnosis. So a diagnosis is not actually required to get support at work or reasonable adjustments. And so it is seen as valid under, and we know this from not just employment law, but also case law. So where does that leave an employer? What's your responsibilities? Well, I'm sure you're all very well versed in understanding the Equality Act. And an individual is considered disabled if they have a physical or mental impairment, which has a substantial and long-term adverse effect on their ability to carry out normal day-to-day activities. And to meet that definition, you need to consider the things a person cannot do or can only do with difficulty. And the Act places a duty on employers to make reasonable adjustments, and that can vary depending on what the role is. But, occupational health and employment law, we know that conditions such as ADHD, autism, dyslexia, they all can meet the definition of disability depending on its functional impact on what they have to do day to day. And other things to be aware of, if you're a civil servant, obviously you have to also abide by the equality duty, and all employers also have to follow the common law duty of care towards their workers as well. And again, being neurodiverse, it would fall under those conditions as well. So I thought it'd be helpful to share some examples of factors which would be considered as having a substantial adverse effect on normal day-to-day activities. And these are actually taken from the Equality Act guidance. So it could be things such as they have difficulty following verbal instructions. I've talked about that in terms of working memory. Persistent and significant difficulty in reading and understanding material, often seen because of processing speed and in people who've got dyslexia. Persistently wanting to avoid people or significant difficulty taking part in normal social interaction or forming social relationships. Again, examples here could be someone who's autistic and asked to be taking part in team meetings or going to team events. Persistent distractibility or difficulty concentrating. Again, ADHD could be one of the conditions that would fit with an example of having an impact on day-to-day functioning. So, what's your role then? You know that you have an obligation under to put in place reasonable adjustments. But of course, what is reasonable? It can differ hugely depending on the type of work that the individual does, the size of the organisation. And at the end of the day, it's only a tribunal that can really decide. But, we don't want to go down that road. We want to be doing things to support that individual without, because it's the good thing to do, not just because we've got legal obligations. And the best thing that you can probably do is have a conversation. Don't make assumptions, and let them tell you about how their condition is impacting them and where their challenges lie at work. Because at the end of the day, they've come to you for support. Something's not going right. They need support with their performance at work, and they want to do well. I mean, it's very unusual for me to have ever seen a case where people don't want support. They're coming to us because they want something to change for good, so that they can continue doing what they do. So really, the focus is about finding ways to enable them to continue that. And the key thing is to really provide support to reduce that risk then of potential absence, moving to a PIP, because again, lots of negativity around that, the stress that goes with it, around that process. Let's try and avoid that as much as possible. Um, and so it's important to kind of understand then what are some of those reasonable adjustments. What can you do, what can be tailored to meet those individual needs. And it might be that you need to reach out to a specialist workplace assessor to ensure that all the factors are taken into consideration. But these are some examples of the types of reasonable adjustments that could be put in place to support your colleagues at work. So whether it's equipment, it could be changing their working arrangements, it could be something to do around lighting, positioning of their desk, or even how information is presented. And when support is not provided or not done so in a timely manner, unfortunately things can go wrong, and there has been an increase in tribunal cases. This is data and research pulled together by law firm Irwin Mitchell, and these figures have been obtained by the Ministry of Justice in terms of how between 2020 and 2025 there's been an increase in the number of tribunal cases involving neurodiverse individuals. So it just you can just see already that there has, with growing awareness, there's also comes a growing understanding of what people can expect in terms of adjustments. And when those adjustments are not given to them or put in place, unfortunately, this can lead to tribunals. But we don't want to go down that road. We want to try and make sure that we're focusing on support. And there seems to be more of a shift in the last few years to an employer in terms of supporting and ensuring the right things are in place for their employees. Access to work funding to support adjustments. We know that it's been cut for civil servants, and there's a reduction in terms of what they're prepared to fund for the private sector. There's also long wait times, which often means that support isn't put in place quickly. You could be waiting a long time for funding. We also know that the Keep Britain Working report by Sir Charlie Mayfield that was published towards the end of last year is really looking to focus on, how you can keep people in work and addressing that rising sickness absence in the workplace. And neurodiversity does fit into that because it's about what can you do to support to keep that person continually working. And so there's a real shift, I think. I can see it cut, in terms of the last few years, in terms of how we are managing and supporting employees at work, with a lot more onus now and coming up in the future on the employer to do their bit to ensure that this happens. And so I think there's a real, there is a shift. I mean, the Employment Relations Act is currently, as I said at the very beginning, I did some work on it last week, going through consultation at the moment, and that means what they're looking at is that if an employer refuses a flexible working request, they must explain why in writing the reason for the refusal, and why their refusal is considered and why their refusal is considered reasonable. So they've got to really justify the choices that they're making if this change comes in with the Act. So as you can see, there's a lot more obligation on an employer, and that's where you're probably going to need support with this. Need support with supporting with adjustments, knowing what can be put in place and implemented given the unique role in which that individual works or the type of organisation. And that's where I really think occupational health can help you with these areas, and that's really why we're here today. And at Insight, I've been developing our services and how we're going to support you as employers and your neurodivergent colleagues. And probably our most popular service is the Workplace Needs Assessment. And that seeks to support individuals to find the appropriate adjustments given their role and what their challenges are. So it's a semi-structured interview with an employee. It assesses, whereabouts they're having those challenges at work, and we don't need a diagnosis to see them. It's not necessary. We're just focusing on understanding the impact that some aspects of their role are having. And we take pretty much a holistic approach, taking account of information provided in advance on the referral by their manager, as well as any information shared by the employee. And we try and positively frame these assessments. We're focusing on identifying and understanding challenges, and we're then looking for the best solutions and adjustments or strategies that can support your neurodivergent colleague. And we might make recommendations for adaptations or strategies to support their performance. And through this, we expect to be able to see that there's a clear understanding of where those challenges lie, and also how performance can potentially be improved. And in turn, the idea being that that's going to build their confidence and improve their self-esteem, so they can continue to work in that role. And there could be several different types of solutions that are suggested. It could be assistive technologies, it could be ergonomics, it could be behavioural strategies, or even no cost or low cost solutions, depending on where the challenge is. We also offer now a more bespoke coaching service, working with one of our specialist coaches. They tend to be qualified coaches or psychologists, and we can offer support in helping your colleague find strategies to help them overcome and improve their performance in their role. It can be accessed following a workplace needs assessment, or it can be a standalone service. And it's really seen as valuable, and I know lots of people have really found it incredibly useful, because we take a strengths-based approach and a solutions-focused approach, and we're looking to find ways that are going to help that individual, support them with strategies to enable them to go back into their workplace and feel confident that they can continue, and also to work well in their job. We also can offer co-coaching with the manager if it's helpful for them to understand and support their colleague, and help with solutions to ways of working. We also can provide ergonomic and assistive technologies. So again, being able to embed learning tailored, specifically to particular tasks. And also we can do some training to enable them to kind of practice under the guidance of a trainer, so that they can feel comfortable in knowing how to use the product properly. We've also launching particular webinars and training. So this is the list of our current offerings. So again, these can be booked individually. They're only 1 hour, so it's just giving you a taster, because we know time is precious. But hopefully it gives you a bit more of a flavour, a bit like what you're having today, to understand for yourself or colleagues, managers, particularly we've got a managers webinar, which is popular as well, and that's really tailored to enabling managers to help and understand and support their neurodivergent colleague. Also, we are aware of long wait times, and occasionally it's important and helpful for somebody to have a diagnostic or a better understanding whether or not they are displaying traits associated with these conditions. So we can now offer diagnostic assessments for dyslexia, dyspraxia, and dyscalculia. and screening for ADHD and autism. This isn't a clinical diagnosis, but will enable you to understand whether your colleague has significant traits associated with these conditions, which could then help give them a language to self-advocate and support themselves at work, and for you to understand a bit better how to support them. Also, if people are going through professional exams or going back to college, often they might need a formal diagnosis to get exam adjustments or study support. So again, this can be useful for some individuals at work. Also, we're offering consultancy. So if you have complex cases that you might want to have some advice about, or you might want to discuss a neurodiversity inclusion audit or content curation, there's lots of different things that people come to us for. So it might be worth, if you want to discuss anything with us, please feel free to reach out. And I suppose one of the other things to think about, when should you refer? Well, it really, it could be at any point in an employee's journey as part of your organization. At the very beginning, before they start, you can, when you've done your the fitness to work assessment, it could be because they've had a recent diagnosis, they've requested it, they could be returning to work after a period of absence. So there's many reasons that you can refer, and if you're not sure, then please just reach out and we're happy to support you and answer any questions. But I think, the key thing is early intervention is key to supporting, and is likely to increase successful outcomes by taking that approach as much as possible. And the benefits of early intervention are that we can put tailored support in place sooner rather than later. It reduces the performance issues or stress involved in that. Also, hopefully it will lower the presenteeism or sickness absence, and avoids escalation to PIPs or disciplinary process, which no one likes. And hopefully, it gives a positive experience, not just to the employee, but their manager as well. And, ultimately, we want to try and reduce any risk of tribunals. But we know from research that 50% of neurodivergent employees are less likely to leave when adjustments are tailored. So that's quite significant and something to think about. And as we're wrapping up this session now, just in case anyone didn't know, the World Economic Forum is currently taking place in Davos at this moment in time. I'm sure most of you know about it. But each year they actually produce a report called the Future of Jobs Report. And each year they highlight where they think, what kind of skill set they think is going to be needed for the future jobs that are being created. And increasing in demand are skill sets that include creative thinking, leadership, social influence, flexibility and agility, analytical thinking, ability to be a systems thinker, problem solving abilities. And so if you look at all of those and you think, does that sound like someone who's neurodiverse? Well, if we go back to our strengths and we can see creative thinking, problem solving, analytical, there's a lot of overlap. And so it's clear to see that there are a number of skill sets and strengths that neurodiverse individuals have that are going to be needed, not just for now, but for jobs in the future. And that's something really positive I hope you can take away from today. And what we know is that decreasing in demand will be manual dexterity, reading, writing, and mathematics. Why? Because we have computers that can do these tasks for us. So the real focus is on these skill sets going forward. This is taken from 2025. The 2026 one isn't out yet. But it's just something worth thinking about when we're looking to support our neurodiverse colleagues. And I think key takeaways from today's session is, neurodiversity presents differently in everybody, and it's nuanced. There can be high levels of co-occurrence, so just don't rely on just one label that somebody tells you. Let's focus on understanding and supporting and overcoming those challenges in work. Let's try and make sure that people feel safe to disclose, to create inclusive cultures, to ensure that people feel that they can work well in their job roles. And of course, if you need additional support, we're here to support you. And to end today, just want to make you aware that we do have a special offer of a 20-minute consultation, and you'll receive a link at the end of this presentation by email, where you can book directly if you'd like to have a free 20-minute consultation regarding any of your colleagues at work or strategies or anything you'd like to discuss around neurodiversity. Then we're very happy to do that for you. You can have up to 10 people joining the call, and that includes the person who registers. Okay, so thank you very much. If you need to get in touch, then please reach out to your account manager, or go through the referral process through ORCID, soon to be G2. But I'd just like to ask you now, if you have any questions, do please let me know. Happy if you want to come off your microphone.
I think there is one in the Q&A, Nina.
Okay.
If you click
yes.
copy,
Oh, yes, I can see.
It.
Yeah.
Is that me?
Yes. Okay. What would you advise as a suitable approach when reasonable adjustments for one neurodivergent employee conflicts with the reasonable adjustments of another neurodivergent employee, especially if one or both of the parties have not
that has a very narrow scope, so it doesn't try to do everything, but it tries to do what it does at a lot of depth. And I really like that and thought that was very special compared to the other proposals that I read. But I didn't give it a 5 because the natural science part is a bit weak.
I'm sorry, someone's got their microphone on.
Can I argue you up to a 4?
Sorry, I was just reading this question, especially if one or both parties have not or do not want to disclose their diagnosis pending assessment. Any advice for employers in this situation, which may become more frequent, especially in certain areas where similar individuals are drawn? Yes, 100% understand where you're coming from, Sean. I've seen that before. That probably is going to require quite a lengthy answer, and perhaps can you reach out to me directly, and I'll be happy to pick that up with you, so that I can answer in a lot more detail than I think we'll have time for today. And
Thank
also,
you,
yeah, no problem. Leslie, did you have a question? I can see your hand up. Okay, maybe we'll come back to Leslie. Julie Alford.
Hi, yes.
Hello.
I was just wondering, I liked your the page where you said about other training. And I just wondered, how do we go about, there was one there specifically for managers about that I was interested in promoting. How do we go about booking those sessions?
Yes, well, let me just go back to my slide. Probably the best thing to do is to reach out to either Jordan or Pippa, who are our account managers, and they will be able to provide you with further details. Let me just go back, see if I can go back. Hold on a second. There, Jordan. That's his email address.
Oh, right, lovely.
Or Pippa. I'll leave that up so other people can see in case they want to get in contact with anybody else from the team. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Does anyone else have any questions at all? Let me see. I've got Sarah.
Hi, Nina. Thank you so much for your presentation. It was really helpful. I just want to know if the recording or any slides will be sent over post-presentation.
Kat, that's true. So we're going to send the recording. It will be available for people that attended. Yes.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Okay. And is that Alison? Alison?
Hi, yes, thanks, Nina. It was really great. Thank you for that. I just wanted to ask you, you raised, you said there was a couple of companies that had done some specific good practices kind of things. I think you said Goldman Sachs,
GCHQ, SAP, They've all put in place, and the civil service have all had have had autism internship programs or work experience programs in place to support.
Yeah, okay. I couldn't quite catch, that's all. I couldn't quite catch the names. That's fine. And I just wanted to make, I didn't want to put it in the chat because I didn't want to obviously spell it wrong, so that's fine. That's great. Thank you.
No, I don't mind incorrect spelling. I'm okay with that, Alison.
Okay, thank you. It's great, but it's great session and really useful.
Oh, thank you. Hayley, sorry, I didn't see your hand there, Hayley.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah, my question is, what's the best way of kind of approaching to a client? So I've got a client that's quite complex, a very old, middle-aged gentleman, not aware that he's neurodiverse, but there's a lot of traits that he's been displaying. And like to offer him further support.
Yeah.
I kind of want to approach him about it, but not quite sure the best way to go about it.
Sure. Have you noticed challenges with his performance at all?
Yes.
Okay, so it might be worth that could be your start point, because you're basing it on something that's tangible.
Okay.
And it might be a good starting point that, I've noticed this has happened recently, or some things I've noticed about how you're performing in certain aspects of tasks, etc. That can be your hook in to opening up the opportunity to kind of perhaps explore that.
Yes.
In a sensitive way, but I think it's really important to try and frame it positively, like you're offering support, not to try and admonish someone or tell them that they're not doing it right. We're trying to move away from those kind of negative connotations, because as I mentioned earlier, a lot of people have had very challenging experiences through life in terms of their neurodiversity. Their personal experiences might have had some quite negative experiences through work, through childhood, through education, so they might be more hypersensitive to criticism. So it's about ensuring that you frame it in a way that is going to hopefully land more softly.
Yes.
If you need any support, Hayley, do feel free to reach out,
okay.
and I can maybe go through it in a bit more detail with you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, I can't see any more hands up, so thanks ever so much, everyone, for coming along today. I'm so pleased that so many of you did attend, and obviously do reach out if we can be of any additional support to you. We'd love to be able to help you, and I'm looking forward to perhaps meeting and working with many of you going forward. Okay, well, thank you again. Lovely to see you all, and take care. Have a good rest of the afternoon. Bye for now.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.